Remote viewing 15, BUGA sphere. The remote viewing was done today, May 10th, but in a way I had already started connecting to the BUGA sphere earlier, around the time of our remote viewing 13, before we even consciously created this session. So the very first thing I felt was an enormous heaviness, as if my whole body had transformed into an extremely dense substance. The energy of the BUGA sphere seemed to enter my body and turn it into something heavy, metallic, almost like lead. It was very uncomfortable and isolating sensation at first, dense, compressed, emotionally and physically restrictive. I felt that I almost couldn't breathe. But over time, as I continued to tune into it, the flow of information became clearer and more coherent. The first concept that came strongly into my mind was hemoglobin. Normally, hemoglobin is responsible for transporting oxygen in a human body, but I didn't feel that oxygen itself was the important part. What I felt was that the function was way more important. The idea of absorbing and releasing, storing and transmitting. I started thinking about how hemoglobin changes its molecular structure depending on whether it carries oxygen or releases it. So in its oxygenated state, hemoglobin shifts into what I call, what is called the relaxed state or air shape. The structure becomes more open, lighter, more flexible. But when it releases oxygen, it changes into this tense state, T-shape, where the molecule becomes more compressed, contracted. So honestly, that was exactly what this object felt like to me. At first, the BUGA sphere felt extremely T-shaped, so very dense, compressed, heavy, almost like lead. But later, as the connection evolved, the sensation became lighter, more like this R state quality. And I had the impression that the BUGA sphere operates through a very similar principle, absorbing, storing, and releasing different forms of energy, of light, depending on its state. So I kept sensing that it was connected mostly to light frequencies. Hemoglobin absorbs specific wavelengths of light. That is a biological fact. And I felt as though the BUGA sphere was doing something very similar, absorbing certain spectrums of energy, storing them, and then releasing them at the appropriate moment. So you could even say that part of this perception has a real biological basis, actually, because hemoglobin generally absorbs specific wavelengths of light. Different states of hemoglobin interact with light differently, which is actually why blood changes color depending on oxygenation. Oxygenated hemoglobin reflects more red light, while deoxygenated hemoglobin, so without oxygen, absorbs light differently and appears darker. So the idea of a structure that changes its interaction with light depending on its energetic or molecular state is not purely symbolic. It already exists in biology. That was mind-blowing actually for me. What stood out to me most was the feeling that this technology was more magnetic than electric. And I remembered a quote from Tyler from Ryoka. Love lets wisdom in. Wisdom reveals pathways that love can explore. They work together as yin and yang. Wisdom is magnetic, love is electric. And this quote suddenly felt deeply connected to this object. The BUGA sphere didn't feel like a simple power source. It felt more like a magnetic accumulator, something that attracts, organizes, and stores very precise frequencies. At one point, I also became aware that its weight seemed variable. Sometimes it felt incredibly heavy, and at other moments lighter, almost warm and fluid. I had the impression that the object reacts to the electromagnetic field of the person interacting with it, almost as if it copies or mirrors the energetic patterns and parameters of whoever touches it. And that made me realize my initial lead sensation may not have belonged entirely to me. It felt almost like the object had previously interacted with another user and temporarily imposed those energetic qualities onto my own field. Another thought that kept repeating itself was different forms of matter carry different forms of light and energy. Everything revolves around this relationship between matter, light, magnetism, and frequency. I even started visualizing atoms responding differently depending on the type of light interacting with them, as if red light increased energetic density and ultraviolet light created lightness or expansion. Whether scientifically accurate or symbolic, that was the perception coming through during the viewing. Later, the sensation in my body shifted from the heaviness of lead into something more like aluminum, lighter, warmer, and more conductive, and much more comfortable energetically. I also focused on the symbols connected to the BUGA sphere, and I had the impression that they represent specific spectrums of frequencies. Like the symbols felt less like a language and more like encoded frequency maps. At that point, I started asking myself what the BUGA sphere actually is, and the strongest impression I received was that it functions like a kind of battery or storage device, but not for ordinary electricity. It seemed designed to accumulate very specific light frequencies, almost like isolating certain colors or energetic bands from a larger spectrum, storing them and just releasing them later where needed. I still can't determine whether it's something ancient, contemporary, accidental, or intentionally left behind, but the information around it feels outside normal logical verification, that's for sure. And honestly, that's what makes these kinds of remote viewings very difficult for me. When we remote view physical objects, there's usually some anchor point for verification. The analytical mind can compare impressions with reality, but with abstract or highly unusual targets like this, there's no clear way to verify the data, and that creates tension between intuition and logic. I remember when I was doing Krzysztof Jackowski's clairvoyance course, he spoke about this exact issue, that remote viewing abstract objects, or generally viewing abstract objects with your intuition, can sometimes become problematic because the analytical mind naturally seeks confirmation and structure. And if we have an actual object that's verifiable results. So this is simply my perspective and the impressions that came through during this session. Okay, so 10 minutes long. Sorry guys, that was really long, but I just wanted to explain everything precisely. And that's that. Thanks. Bye bye.